So have you gotten responses yet?
Yeah, really positive responses. Yeah, a couple checks, but we need, we need some big checks.
Yeah.
Jonna.
Doing Grace.
How are you?
Good.
How big an audience we would have, how big a live audience?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are gonna Zoom it, huh?
Right.
It was about half of the last time because it's been a long time since we did a canvas.
When I was elected, the last time we had.
What's that, 12 years now? 8 years? 8, yeah.
And that's how long I was on.
Like this.
Everybody, can I have your attention, please? I'm Jennifer Blackman. I'm the general manager at the BCPUD, and it's my honor to be the moderator for Candidates Night 2022. It's our first attempt at having a hybrid meeting. So we believe that we've got everybody here on Zoom that's wanting to participate. We asking everybody that is participating on Zoom to mute your microphone unless you are going to be called upon to speak. And when we are in the audience participation portion, would you please raise your hand on the screen so that you can be called on for your question. And what I'm going to do is start out by just reading briefly what the format of the meeting historically is. If any of the candidates want to suggest some sort of change to format, please do. But I just want to explain how the evening will go. Each candidate, and I'll just go left to right, talking with people in order, will have up to 3 minutes to make an opening statement. Following the opening statement, there'll be audience participation segment, and 3 minutes will be allowed for a candidate to respond to a question if it's only directed at the candidate. If the person wants all candidates to answer the question, then each person gets 1 minute. And if the question is directed just to one candidate and other candidates would like to speak to it, they just get 1 minute. And I'll try to loosely enforce that. It was just to keep us on a sensible time frame, but I'm not going to actually pull you off stage if you exceed the limit. So after the audience participation section, the candidates will have the opportunity to ask each other questions, when each candidate can ask 1 question of each of the other candidates with 3 minutes to be allowed for the candidate to respond. And then finally, we'll have closing statements of 3 minutes per candidate. Is that okay with everybody? Does anyone want to propose any changes? Okay. And I'm just going to go sit back down and I will start. Just going to start my stopwatch so that I'll let you know if anything's going significantly over. But we'll start with Grace, then go to Jeannie, then Jack, then Andrew.
Ready?
Yeah.
All right, I'm Grace Godino. I've been on the board for the last 8 years, 2 terms. I am not quite a Marin County native because we moved to Tennessee Valley when I was 2. Lived there for a long time, lived on the Sausalito waterfront for 12 years, and then came out here a bit over 30 years ago. So I've worked at the school for 30 years. And I'm also a marriage and family therapist. And what I believe that I bring to the board specifically is that I do feel like I have a wonderful opportunity to know the families in town because I see those parents frequently. I know all the kids. And I was just talking to Jeannie about it. I think that those voices sometimes are not so easily heard because they have less time to attend meetings. And so there's kind of an organic way that I can have conversations with people. And I really appreciate that. I also, I've been on the personnel committee for the last 8 years. And I think that some of my training and skills are useful in that capacity. I've been on a lot of boards. This is by far the most functional and wonderful board I've ever been on. It's, I think that our staff is terrific. I think the board works really well together. It's very respectful when we disagree, but in general, there's just this a deep belief in what the BPUD does in the moratorium and in continuing to keep this town moving in a way that provides a really safe drinking water, good septic and sewer, and a place where we all want to live. And I think the board's done a good job of that all these years, and I'm really honored to be on the board and would like to continue that work.
Yeah. Yes, so I'm Jeannie McNaughton, and I've been in and out of Bolinas for the last 50 years, it seems. I had to look it up. And when I first came to Bolinas, it was like coming home. I grew up in New York City. I never liked all that concrete. And then we spent, my husband and I, several years in Buffalo while he was Buffalo, New York, where he was getting his degree. And the soot was raining down on us from the Bethlehem steel mills. The water was Lake Erie water. I don't have to say anything else. And the environmental laws were not even in effect then. Later on, we found out just how terrible that environment was. So we spent a year in New Hampshire, and friends who had come here asked us in the middle of winter, why are you there? Bless you. Come to Bolinas. And so it just so happened that the day that we were going to leave Bolinas, because we couldn't find a place to buy that was within our price range, our house came on the market. So that's where we've been ever since. And I was thinking too, as Grace pointed out, when my kids were little, I could work on school issues like discipline and building behavior codes, things that would allow the students at the school to learn instead of being interrupted by chaos, which was sort of what was happening there then. So when the kids grew up and I started to work in town at a place called a project called Project Jonah, which, if anybody remembers Joan McIntyre, a wonderful whale lady. And I took a trip to talk to people down the east coast of Latin America, to talk to people about the tuna dolphin issue. And having done that once, because my background was in philosophy and history, I said, I've got to go back and get my biology degree. So I had to leave. And I had to write a little essay on leaving this place that I loved so much to go to Santa Cruz and face all the demons. They were called calculus and physics and chemistry. And I came through and I came back. And then I just realized that why I had done all of that was to bring something back to Bolinas. And so I ran for the board and was on the board for 8 years. And then I got a job at the US Environmental Protection Agency and could no longer sort of make that commute. I tried it. I tried several years doing it. It was just too exhausting. And then I got a job working on the US-Mexico border on water and wastewater projects. So I did that for the next 25 years, but keeping my toes in on various projects like the Land Stewardship Committee. And
That's 3 minutes, but you can.
okay, just going to finish up and say, I'm back now and I want to do it again. I want to help the town and the BPUD board do the best it can, given these real challenging environmental issues that we're facing. Thanks.
My name is Jack Seidman. I moved to Bolinas in 1977. I've been in the same house the whole time. I have 5 kids. They've all gone through the Bolinas school and graduated from TAM. I got elected to the school board in the early 80s, and in the early 90s, I got elected to the BPUD. And I've been on the board for 30 years, which is incredible. And I would tell you that this is my last rodeo. And I thought I would run for one more time. There's a couple of projects that I'm working on that I'd like to see through to completion. But I think that I'm ready to see the next generation kind of get the baton passed and to continue. My primary focuses are on maintaining the moratorium, representing the community to the rest of the world, primarily the county, but also state and federal government as is necessary. So that the BPUD speaks for the community, and we are a forum for people who have no place else to go to express their concerns. I've been elected the president of the board numerous times, basically repeatedly, probably because I have a facility for chairing a meeting and getting it done efficiently and in a manner that allows everyone to participate without dominating. And so I've been gracious enough to accept that from my other board members, and they support me in that. We have an excellent staff. In some respects, I think it's the best staff we've ever had in my 30 years on the board. And my main concern is to see the community continue to be the community that we've been. It's very difficult. More and more houses are getting bought up as second homes. The population of the school has gone down, and the demographics of our town have changed. But in the same manner, it's also become more interesting, and there's a different dynamic going on. And I think I'm in touch with all of that. And so I enjoy what I'm doing. I'd like to have one more round being on this board to sort of help finish off some of these. And I would tell you, my primary concern now, or not concern, but the project I'm most interested in is that the BPUD building has reached the end of its lifespan. It's 100 years old. We've had it inspected. Everyone agrees that it's not salvageable. It's got way too many problems. And so it's been decided to demolish the building and build something new, and in the process create something that's a little more usable for the whole community. We don't need a lot of that space for preschool anymore, so we can apply other uses. So I've begun working on a committee to we're just doing the very basics right now. But I'm really looking forward to that because I think it's time for this town to have a new meeting space for the BPUD. It might have other uses as well for other uses in the community. And I also just want to see, as much as time's up, a nice transition as some of the members of the board leave and others come on, that there's a continuity that helps a lot for our staff. So if you would like to see me on the board, I hope you vote for me, and I'll give it one more run. Thank you.
My name is Andrew Alexander Green. I'm going to read this because you guys probably don't know me as well as you know Jack and Grace and Jeannie. My wife and I were drawn to Bolinas for many of the same reasons you all were: the natural beauty of the environment, tight-knit community, the quiet, the surf. I feel a better sense of community here than other places I've lived. I think we're all here for many of the same reasons, and we have a lot more similarities than we think we do. I'm interested in being on the BPUD board because I'm part of this community, but want to be involved. I'm one of the Bolinas soccer crew. I play soccer with 7-year-olds and 75-year-olds, 3 generations on the field a couple times a week. We have meals together, we take vacations, celebrate holidays, grieve losses, and talk about town problems and how to solve them. Maybe we talk more about the problems. It's a great forum. These friendships have taught me a lot about the town's past, and I've realized that the way things are or are perceived can actually be a lot different than how they seem. I guess I've learned how to listen to all the generations. I'm an architect with a problem-solving brain and have been collaborating with diverse groups of people for over 20 years. I understand the constraints and processes of working with Marin County and the Coastal Commission and want to help educate our town on the way these complex and frustrating processes can work. I've also been volunteering as a BCLT board member for 3.5 years. I think affordable housing and the naturalness of this place can live together. My BCLT path has been another great way to meet more of the community and understand the magnitude of the housing problem. I understand that my role as the BPUD director, I would need to be objective and not come in with an agenda. I certainly understand how to recuse myself and on any project I've been involved with, if that's an issue for anyone. I also understand how the BPUD has been a community platform for the town, and I'm very much in support for allowing those conversations to continue to happen respectfully. Again, community and more opportunity to talk together. I have 3 main ideas or concepts. 1, I am the next generation. Each new generation brings a new perspective, fresh perspective. A younger generation, I hope, can bridge BPUD standards developed by important previous BPUD stewards of the water moratorium and become the new stewards and carry the torch forward. And I think this is happening on other boards in town, and it's important for us to be involved and move the community together on the same page. But we do owe so much to these previous stewards, so it's kind of our responsibility now. New ideas. Our forward-thinking predecessors identified water issues 50 years ago. A new monitoring technology, providing a new BPUD office, climate constraints, improving water and sewer operations are some future opportunities we can address. And I think some of those things would be like new sewer connections to help environment and save housing. More on that later.
Excuse me,
Yeah,
could you slow down a little?
sure.
You're talking really
I'm
fast.
sorry.
I missed it. Your time's.
Okay.
Welcome to the BPUD.
And my last thing is kind of echoing what Jack said is BPUD is only as good as their staff, and they have a wonderful staff. But I'm interested in providing technology, tools, support, and essential administrative and operations staff support, so that monitoring leaks and issues can become more of a system and a technology versus scrambling at 3 in the morning to put out fires. So pleased to meet you all, and looking forward to the rest of the night.
Thanks.
Okay, so this, well, thank you for all, trying your best to stay within the time constraints. I know it comes fast. So now we have our audience participation segment, and that's where, questions can come from the audience with 3 minutes allowed for a response from each candidate, with other candidates getting 1 minute if the question was just directed at one candidate. But, if you want all candidates to answer, try to confine your response to 1 minute if you can. And I'm happy to call on people, and we also, if we have people participating via Zoom, if they raise their hands on the computer, then Bell can let them in to the meeting. So does anyone want to start? Yeah. Okay.
My name is Jeff Platt, and it's a question for everyone. We have a system of water meters in Bolinas, to my knowledge, where we have limited use water meters that have a specific allocation associated with them. And then we have unlimited water meters. And I'm just curious if you think that's fair, and if you think there are ways to improve that situation.
So that's directed at each candidate?
Everybody,
At everybody. So why don't we go, if you guys don't mind, in the same order, you each would get a minute to respond. And then we'll reverse next time. So it's not-
So I have to start every time. I think that the process that we go through is fair. Because we apply it to everyone who's doing, when a permit comes before us, they get a limited water use permit. Do I think that there might be ways to improve that? Perhaps. I'd be interested to hear more behind what you're thinking, Jeff,
Well,
because
I wasn't implying that you don't apply that test fairly. It's just, it seems to me odd that some people in town, because they've gone through the appropriate permitting process, have less access to water, and other people who have had houses here for a long time, maybe who built things illegally, have a greater access to water. It seems to me that a certain amount, we're just worried about the money. We should have people access. I'm kind of leading the question.
kind of thinking that everyone should be limited in some, that there should be a blanket limitation is what I'm hearing. Yeah, I don't. It's tricky because it's not our job to go as the BPUD to go around and look at people's illegal houses. I mean,
I'm not,
obviously, I'm not suggesting that you're thinking that. One of the things that we really noticed during the last year, we were so tight on water, was that people in the town pretty much across the board did an incredible job of staying way under they're limited or they're unlimited. Everybody was just very, very low. And I think that that's in general been true in this town, that when water is tight, people are super careful. So I haven't felt very often that there were people who were using astronomical quantities and kind of taking it away from the rest of everybody. But, you know, imposing a blanket limit has some challenges, but
That's 1 minute unless we want
Thank you,
to
I'm
increase it across the board.
Yeah, no, I'm
But
done.
do you feel like 1 minute's enough? Okay.
yeah, I think so.
So I'd say that I have a list of things that I'm going to mention in my wrap up of things that I think that the BPUD could be helping the community with our obvious environmental issues. Thinking drought and our water constraints. And that's my hot button issue. I was going to leave it off the table, but since Jeff you brought it up, what I'd say is, yes, there is an element of a perception of unfairness. And what I would suggest in my thinking about how to go through the process of really determining how fair or unfair it is to do something like a survey. We do have the evidence, as Grace pointed out, that people are really very careful about their water use. And those that go over are generally come to the board to explain what's gone on. But the perception is still there. And for a former government worker, perception is everything. So if we could evaluate in some objective way how people work through that quote unquote unfairness, I would be interested in seeing what we could do to at least discuss it.
Well, there is an inherent unfairness in the way the system is set up right now. If you want to have improvements to your property and you apply for a permit with the county, then your permit issue comes before the BPUD to see whether your project's going to require you to use more water. And if you're going to need more water, then the BPUD has the right to put a limit on how much more water you get. So then from that point, you have what we're calling a limited water use permit. Whereas if you don't apply for a permit from the county and have the same kind of project going, then nobody really knows that. And you continue to use as much water as you've been allowed by the BPUD, which is pretty much unlimited as far as we're concerned. It is unfair. Now, we've made a couple of efforts to make it more fair. Some people who had limits imposed because it was based on their prior usage, and the prior usage was low because they were really ecologically sound and were trying to take care of that, got punished for being efficient. Other people who had higher uses were given better allotments. So we've tried to rectify that by raising up those people who are too low. Now we have to go over and get the high users who have no limits. We can monitor their water usage and work with them on bringing it down. And that would at least address the inherent unfairness on both ends.
I think there is definitely some unfairness built in. I think the incentive to build a league don't become scrutinized by the county for a permit is kind of a double-edged sword. But you know, we live in a country where people are fighting for their rights and they don't like them taken away. So I think it's really a delicate thing. I do think though that limiting everyone's water is such an easy solution if we do get to a point where it's a problem. And I think the drought was a good test for us to you know, be resourceful, be thoughtful, be limiting on how much water we use. But it does seem like a good tool that if we needed to get more water, use less water, we could do that. I think a society or a tribe or a community or a culture, we all agree on things that are for the best, even if we don't all benefit. And if we all find that the drought or whatever environmental prohibitions there are, if there's a value in using less or limiting our water, then it could be something that would be a pretty simple solution.
Thank you guys. I'm sorry that I have to keep.
No.
It's
Good.
really-
It's really hard for us to keep track, so
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Next question. Jenny?
One is really fast. It came from my household. Everyone knows, not everyone, but it was ask that I ask all of you, first, this is fast, have all of you been to our water source? And you know where it is, where we get our water, and have been there. And then, since that's a fast one, I had, have information and read about a system whereby there's extraction from the air to provide water, and there are systems like this that are out and available through purchase or building. So I wonder if any of you have heard of that and what your feelings are on such a system, if it would be good for us to have. Those are my things.
You want me to go, right?
Sure.
Yes, if you don't mind.
Of course. So, I'm really fascinated by our water source and infrastructure, and I started to venture up to Arroyo Hondo one day, but I was wearing shorts and I started to get scared by the poison oak.
And nettles.
So I came around, I came back, I retreated. But I do want to go still. I've seen a lot of photos. In terms of collecting water and extracting water, I'm super fascinated by that. I have purchased a fog collector. And it is a method used by some South Americans to collect heavy fog and use it, a place where it barely ever rains. And I have seen the things about extracting moisture from the air. We have a very humid climate, obviously. And I've also seen systems like small scale systems of desalinization, which use a ton of energy, and also you need to put the salt somewhere. So I think that's a challenge, but I'm really open to looking at those ideas, and I think they're really intriguing to think about, at least for emergency purposes.
I have been up Arroyo Hondo on a number of occasions, and I'm always astounded that this entire town's water supply comes from that little creek, but it just keeps pumping. It's a miracle creek. We have been improving our system by working on getting leaks, and also on having our reservoirs tight so that we don't lose too much that way. You're always going to lose something by evaporation. I think that we've looked into a couple of possible alternatives, such as a fog collection system. I talked to somebody about that, and they said that the amount of material that we would need to use in order to collect enough water from a fog collection system is so huge, it would really be hard. It also would have to be out where the wind blows a lot, and that would be a problem. We once looked at wind and as a potential source of drawing up water from, but it turned out that although when the wind blows on the mesa, it blows really hard, it turns out it doesn't blow nearly as many days as we think it does, or as frequently during the day. So that didn't turn out to be. So I've come to the conclusion that an efficient use of water by the people in our town and developing a better collection and delivery system is probably the best way for us to keep providing the water that we need. That's the conclusion I've reached.
And I would just second what Jack said. I know the people in Chile, in the driest desert in the world, they do collect their water on nets, but that's really extreme. Sorry?
No.
Oh,
go
it's
ahead.
just-
It's computer.
Sorry. So at any rate, I think we do what we already lived through a drought, and we saw how well we did. We need to do more of that. And I think that part of, and I'll speak to that when I wrap up, that's something that I would like to help the community work on, so that we do make sure that all of us, as many as we can, are using our water as efficiently as we can, and that we're collecting water, rainwater, when it comes, so that we do have at least that as an alternate use of water. We're not using BCPUD water when it doesn't need to be used. So yes, interesting other observations, but we're just too small a place to be able to go ahead and do the kinds of things, the engineering kinds of things we would need to do. And desalination is like a no starter, frankly, because of all the environmental problems it creates.
And visiting the source of our water.
Oh, yes, yes, I have many times, and gotten stung many times. Nettles in that case. Sorry, thank you for that.
Yeah, well, when I first came to town, I lived on Rose Lane and that was my run. It was not so much in the spring, better later in the year when it's not so heavy. One of the things that's been so interesting to me being on board for the last years is that regularly either the staff or people from town bring ideas to the board about, new technologies that they've read about. And I think that particularly Jennifer has done an amazing job of delving deeper into those and seeing what's possible, what might work, what might not, and why not. And the fog catchment is so interesting, and it just does not seem like it's going to work here for the reasons that were mentioned. But the way that technology is evolving, I love having these ideas come, because part of our job as the board, and it's written in, is that we need to look at alternative sources of water for the town, because that's what we're supposed to do in support of the moratorium. Actually, we have the moratorium because we say there's not enough water. And so we are required to look into these other ideas. And I think that done a good job of that. And I'm waiting for something to come that would really potentially work. Would be fantastic, but not yet, I think.
Okay, and then for the next round, we'll start with Jack and then go around.
Oh, okay.
So we're just for the
Flex.
yeah. Our next question, is anyone online? Okay. Okay,
Name's Rudy Ferris. I've lived there a long time, and I'm a Bolinas Lagoon advisor. And one of my great concerns of Bolinas is the density of traffic downtown and people. Because every single street drain goes into the lagoon. And the greater the density of cars, et cetera, down there, the more of this effluent and whatever they have goes into the lagoon. Particularly worrisome is a constituent of tires called 6-PPD. And this kills coho salmon. With an eloquent study at the University of Washington, which shown that these tire particles get in the water and kill coho salmon. And the fact that it kills coho implies that there may be many other species that could be killed. And for this reason, I wonder if there isn't a way for us to lower the density of automobile traffic in town. And this is a concern that I directly have with the 31 Wharf Road project, which is right over the street drains in Bolinas. Now, this is a significant problem. To give you an idea, where that discharges, where all these drains discharge, is right across the street from the marine land. And the last eelgrass beds were just to the north of that, and they're gone. So we have no more eelgrass in Bolinas. This is something they have to consider carefully. It's an important environmental issue.
Well, since I'm responding first right now, so only a portion of what you're talking about is really something the BPUD can do anything
I
about.
understand.
Yeah. So Wharf Road, of course, is a county maintained road, and it's open to the public. And what we all have seen is the influx of tourism, and the increase in tourism over the last few years has been phenomenal, to the point where a lot of us just won't go downtown at all on the weekend. And so the problem has to do with controlling the number of tires that roll down that road that release what you're talking about. And I'm not sure what we can do to control the number of people coming into town as much as it's a problem. In the same way that we can't seem to do much about all the people who are buying up our homes and don't live in them.
I understand.
So that's the problem. On the other hand, the BPUD can function as a forum to address that issue and get some ideas on what to do with it, and convey that not just to the county, but to the state and the feds as well. And say, look, here's a problem that we have. It's not completely under our control. It's really not under our control, but we're speaking for the community, and we would like something done about this. And you raise a legitimate environmental question. And I think the issue is that the BPUD would be more of a conduit for expressing that concern to agencies that can do something about it. I would support that.
Could I respond to this, John?
Okay, as long as you just want to give everybody equal time, so I'm keeping track. But
One thing to consider is there's all these surf camps and fishing camps now and whatnot. And it seems a possibility to me, although I don't know the official law there, to use shuttles, to get people up here, to use shuttles to bring them down to the beach where it's certainly their beach as well. But it's our infrastructure and parking and whatnot. So this is something we really do have to pursue.
Yeah, yeah.
50 years we've been talking about that.
We'll talk
Yeah.
about it for another fish.
I'll be gone.
I think that basically everybody's kind of comfortably taking more like a minute and a half, so I'm increasing everybody's time. So it's-
Thank you.
But then don't start going. long.
Right. So in response to Rudy and to Jack, I think that these are really legitimate issues. And if you look at the Bolinas Community Plan, they speak about parking and they say, we don't want parking lots. And I know that's what they were thinking, and that made sense in those days, at those times. But we have a parking lot at Mesa Park. So the shuttle idea is a good one and should be, of course, we do it during the Labor Day festivities, and when we expect a lot of people, we do have means to restrict the traffic. And I think I know that there's been a group that's been working on traffic issues very assiduously with the county, and we've heard their reports at BCPUD meetings, and really to be congratulated. It seems to me another piece, though, of what Rudy mentioned about the Bolinas Lagoon, we really have lost sight, I think, of the importance of the lagoon for the environment and how precious it is. That's something that we really need to revitalize our interest in it. And I would like to see us do more. I'd suggest that the BCPUD have a period of time within perhaps a BCPUD meeting, or maybe as a special meeting from time to time on these issues that we don't get a chance to talk about at the BCPUD meeting because of the important issues that come up that are directly related to BCPUD priorities. So we need to get better informed about all of these issues and see what we can do as a community to work on them positively.
I think certainly what's frustrated the downtown parking committee and what has frustrated all of us so repeatedly over the years is the interlocking series of agencies that have jurisdiction, and navigating through those is so phenomenally time consuming and often very frustrating. I absolutely share your concerns. And just watching the difficulty that downtown parking committee has had putting any kind of regulation in that might in some small way mitigate the influx of people coming downtown has really run up against a lot of barriers, particularly but not exclusively with Coastal Commission mandates for free access. And it's just, I don't think it's impossible, because I don't think anything's impossible, but it is so complicated, and it will be years. But that doesn't mean that I don't believe it's not worth working on, because it seems like such an obvious idea. Yes, could run shuttles. BCPUD for a long time had Lagoon Advisory Board as one of our standing reports, and perhaps part of, to speak to what you were speaking to Jeannie with, is to that had kind of fallen in abeyance. But if there's a resurgence of community interest in that, then there is on the agenda a place for that to happen.
We can do it.
Sí se puede.
So, and there was a question that was submitted to me by an audience member.
I think you need Andrew to.
I'm sorry. Thank you so much. I'm sorry.
I think it's heartbreaking to be driving along the lagoon or kayaking in the lagoon and realizing that there's like a material that is killing salmon just because it's better compound for a vehicle tire, which we know is like, there's hundreds of millions of cars in the United States alone. So, part of me is thinking, well, let's like work to legislate that material, and then that becomes an overwhelming thought, and that's not something necessarily the BCPUD has priority to do, but we could write a letter. And then the shuttle, like you read the community plan and it identifies all these problems 50 years ago. And then you read like the town that fought to save itself. And you're like, how did they not get that one? Because they were like so passionate and endlessly motivated to make this change happen. Maybe they just needed another few years for a reset, but I think the parking shuttle is an awesome idea. I've thought myself like, should I look into getting insurance and driving people to and from one day just to like see how it goes? Because like it's like an experiment almost, right? And we could put PV panels here, we could have a charging station, it could be an electric vehicle. There's so many options in terms of that. I think it would be fun. Like you could go to the shuttle and you could have a conversation with someone. You probably would end up hanging out with them more downtown, catching up. It's like a very communal thing. It's like the post office. It could be the shuttle or the jitney or whatever. So I support that. I do, like Grace said, I have a conflict with the Coastal Commission's kind of directive of allowing more access to the coast, but then the people accessing the coast are damaging the coast. So it's definitely something that is tenuous for me, and I wish I had like a clear path to figure it out.
Thank you, and I'm sorry again for forgetting that. I didn't mean to cut you off. How about another question from the audience?
I have one just for Dean.
Okay.
I'm Jonna, I'm Andrea Alexander Green's wife. I read your article in the hearsay about the affordable housing project. You called it worker housing for the wealthy. When in fact it's essential worker housing.
I don't
for
think
B+ staff.
I don't think I ever
Okay.
called that.
In
Oh dear, did I do
in
In
addition
my
to
own-
other projects that you propose that are affordable housing projects.
Oh, I know it. Sorry, I
Okay.
did write that.
Okay.
I did.
I swear I wrote it.
No, I'm sure I did.
Yeah, and as the leader of Muscle, your group has opposed affordable housing projects while turning a blind eye to illegal housing developments and lot clearing. And I would like to know, as a BCPUD board member, do you intend to fight housing projects?
So speak to that, and thank you for bringing that up. The problems that we saw with the group that opposed the several projects that were in our neighborhood was the idea that we really didn't see a good overview of how affordable housing should be developed in Bolinas. At the time, I think I didn't have a good understanding of how those lots are going now for these incredible amounts of money. But that would have been something to really present to the BCLT as alternatives. So our most heartbreaking project was really the 31 Wharf, not the 31 Wharf, the Aspen lots, which was essentially a demonstration garden of what the coastal scrub habitat should be and what Bolinas should look like. So we really wanted to make some kind of a deal. Hey, could we get you to think about not destroying this habitat and go ahead and we'll have our blessings on all the other projects. The proposal for the land next to the Teixeiras was indeed proposed at first as worker habitat, worker housing. And who are the workers being, who are they working for? It was farm workers as I read it. And of course, BCLT descriptions of all of their projects changes from time to time. Looked like that was the focus. We only want it for farm workers who are working for farms that we recognize as being legitimate in some way. So that's the origin of my comment. To that.
Can I respond?
Well, just let me finish, but to say I do not, and I never have opposed affordable housing. I hear the issue and lived with it in Molinas of illegal buildings, buildings that aren't to code that people have to live in. Because it's such a difficult thing to find housing in Molinas. And it is something that's been around in Molinas since before the Molinas plan, community plan, and is called out in the plan, interestingly. So it's never a matter of not supporting affordable housing, but it is a matter of asking the BCLT to work in a larger framework that includes the environment first, because I feel like the environment is the last thing that's really considered. And to make it such that we all understand what the values are that we have living here and what we have to protect. But I don't think those two are incompatible in any way, and I've never said that.
So by our process, if anyone of the other candidates wants to say, you would have 1 minute to offer a comment, then you could have a follow-up question. Anybody else want to?
Well, I would just to remind you, Jeannie, because he just put this on the table. I mean, you did say that these rich people would remake Bolinas in their image, a place where the wealthy and super wealthy could build their estates and supply their workers with local affordable housing. So that concerns me because I don't think that's what the affordable housing is all about in our town. I know many people who live in land trust housing, and a lot of them have been here for a long time, and they don't work for the wealthy people at all. They're just our friends and neighbors who couldn't buy a home, but they're entitled to live here too. So I'm not sure I agree with that statement.
I hope it doesn't turn out to be that's like a speculation of the way in which I think it's going, but I agree with you.
Okay.
I've heard much more about people being able to get decent housing, and I'm absolutely for that. So
Okay.
I hear you. So John, go ahead, sorry.
Well, I just want to follow up on that because one thing that I've always had a difficult time with is my experience with your environmentalism, and I know you're very passionate and experienced, but it's been at a county hearing where you have hired an attorney to delay or object to a project for housing. And I guess my question is kind of like, why, or where do you stand on helping the environment, helping people? Because there's 200 people on the wait list for the land trust. 75% of Bolinas is low income. So almost everyone is those low income workers for the wealthy, as you wrote. And it seems like you're subjectively going after those projects when you can take a walk along the mesa, for instance, and see, maybe a dozen recently cleared lots with fences around them that have destroyed coastal scrub or habitat. And I'm wondering, like, since those are that would be so easy to enforce, wouldn't require a lawyer. Why haven't you gone after those versus the housing projects, I guess?
Because I don't believe those are very easy. We're talking about property now, and remembering that the Constitution, the great Constitution that we all live on, values property rights practically above everything, even humans. My whole issue is not, yes, I am passionate about the environment. I have noticed time and again with all a number of projects that CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, is pushed aside. Oh, it's just holding up things and it's not letting us do what we want to the environment. Well, what we have done to the environment is to destroy it. And we really are in a very grave place. And I think, I guess my point is we need to bring the environment back to the table and have it be part of every issue that we consider, including affordable housing. So I would love to see us be able to buy, as we had hoped to do in the community plan, buy open space So from people who had lots that they didn't think were so damn valuable in those days. If we had done that, could we have done a better job of managing our environment so that we didn't come to this crisis point? So that's the past. In the future, my ideas for the being on the BPUD board has more to do with helping us work within the limits of the resources that we have. And I would not oppose, just to say, I would not oppose affordable housing but I would like to see the process improved greatly to become more transparent and to get more input. And even quote unquote, if you don't have to ask your neighbors about a project, that the BCL team make it an absolute priority to talk to its neighbors before projects are proposed and started and built on. So I want a fair process. That's what I want. I don't want no affordable housing.
Do you want to say something?
For a minute.
Okay.
Please. Affordable housing's pretty near and dear to me because I've watched what's happened at the school over the last 30 years. I've watched where almost all of the teachers live in town, and that's absolutely not true anymore. I'm one of the few people who's still here. And we've lost so many families because the rentals have been bought. They've been turned into second homes. People who work at the school, even though our school pays well for school, which is still not very well compared to Google, perhaps. People can't afford to live. And that turning a community into a place where families can't be, I think is really a serious problem for the community and not a direction that I would like us to go in. I think it's possible to have as much affordable housing as we can get here, which is going to be very limited because of the huge property values, and continue to be good stewards of the environment. I don't think that's mutually exclusive at all. And I think both are very important.
Okay.
Did John want to have her follow-up
Well,
question?
wait, okay, you can follow up, but let's get a couple other questions, we'll go around a little bit more. How about Jack?
Oh, man. Some touchy things have come up, 2 or 3 of them.
Mhm.
I can cram them all in one question. In the past, since BPUD doesn't really pay the living salary, anybody. We depended on whatever expertise members of the board might have to bring to bear in the running of the district to help the staff and the management in technical matters where this and that director might have expertise. Paul Capus comes to mind. His legal expertise was invaluable back during the moratorium. All the rest of us shut the hell up and let him do the talking. He also had a steel trap mind with respect to technical matters. He could inspect the collection system and divine ways to improve it. Things like that. Plus the fact that back in those times, the BPUD was the protector of its ratepayers against the blundering excesses of county over-regulation. Which brings us to the subject brought up over here. There was really no such thing, certainly by my standards, according to my income, and my friends, there's no affordable housing in Bolinas except illegal housing. The BPUD interposed itself between the county trying to bait the illegal housing. And the people who live, I can remember we had printed up signs, county personnel, law enforcement, you are forbidden to enter these premises. Attach a note to the sign. So, there were reasons for that. The county, all the cities have the tax base. Except for recent purchases of very expensive real estate here. But the cities had all the tax base, so the permit processes at the county were all fee driven. And more often than not, the permit fees would exceed the cost of your material. If you didn't label and sell it, way below $50. Nobody bothered with it. For one thing, after the Cuesta project got shot down, the county would force you to build a huge mounted septic system. If you wanted to expand your garage. Nobody got a permit. They're permitless, outbuildings, whole dwellings still extant on the mesa. I want to ask all four of you guys, are you willing to protect these people like the BCPUD did in the past? And are you willing to devote whatever technical expertise you have to help run this district and help the staff and the management out in that respect? Each one of you.
It starts with me. Okay, so thanks, Jack, for reminding us of why, quote unquote, we have all these illegal dwellings. They get characterized by organizations trying to,
Well, they're resented by
yeah,
people who don't understand the history.
right. So it's really important to know that history. I would say that I am willing to do what you're talking about to protect people who are in those circumstances. And indeed, what I propose is to help the community, as I said, in sort of general terms, make the best use, support the best use of our water resources. And to that end, for example, composting toilet ordinance is something that we have in Bolinas that happened when I was on the board. Because we did have some promise from the county that that would be acceptable for Paradise Valley. And we parlayed that into a general composting toilet ordinance. So they're quote unquote legal, if you will. There are many ways now to use those facilities. I know that people have found them difficult on the one hand, but there's new improvements that can be electrified. We don't have to go into the ins and outs of it, but we know that people are using them in the town. We heard from someone the other night who had a composting toilet, and nobody blinked an eye. What? I'd like to see it being used in the wintertime for many people, because that's the place where we really have our problems with septic. And to the point of the septic costs in Marin County are outrageous. They're outrageous in Alabama too. And what they do with people who don't have septic systems that cost $40,000 because they don't have the money is they put them in jail. Well, the county hasn't gotten that far for us in Bolinas, but we definitely have to fight for the right to have an understandable water regime that helps us live here in the way that the environment allows us to live here.
Okay, Grace, you can have 2 minutes.
Okay, I don't think I'll take that one. You know, having come from the Sausalito waterfront, I'm pretty familiar with the outlaw mentality. I see the BCPUD's opportunity as creating a liaison, working as a liaison to take county regulations and costs that are out of our control, but also very onerous for the community on an individual level or on a community level. And work with people to come up with programs that can make things happen that will work here. As you said, like the compost, making compost toilets acceptable, that type of thing. And I think that that's something that an agency like the BCPUD can offer the community. I don't see myself manning the barricades and flinging Molotov cocktails towards the Civic Center. But I think that's not really particularly useful anymore either. We had parking tickets affixed to our houseboat because we were parked on an underwater street. And that happened for many years. And, that was kind of daunting to come home to, but in terms of my talents in the BCPUD, yes, absolutely, such as they are. I feel like I have already put them at the BCPUD's disposal and would continue to do so. And thank you for your question. I liked that question.
You have taste and discernment.
When my wife and I moved to town, we kind of were told by many people that you don't go after people who have anything illegal or something that wouldn't be permitted, and myself for putting out their shower been reported and attacked repeatedly. So I think that policy, that's kind of like an unspoken Bolinas rule. I do think the BCPUD, from a BCPUD perspective, there is a if it comes on to the agenda, it comes to the door, then it's something that has to be considered. But I don't think the BCPUD has a role to kind of search and identify people who have done things illegally. I mean, you said so many things that just like are my day-to-day in my profession, the cost of things, the cost of permits, the process, the time it takes to get them. Jeannie mentioned a CEQA report for more projects that costs $50,000 and takes 6 months. So it is, if you're trying to put people in houses and you kind of do a $50,000 report and it's going to cost you $700 a square foot to build something, it's like you said, affordable housing is not affordable, right? Like it's $1 million for an affordable housing unit in the Bay Area for a developer who's being incentivized by kickbacks and government subsidies. One thing that I'm really interested to talk about is projects that the BCPUD can do that are related to helping people and solving environmental problems. And there's a really good one that I think could take place. The sewer ponds they're kind of undergoing a test because downtown there was water gets pumped up to the sewer ponds, right? So water from storm drains was getting into that pumping and it was overburdening the system. And the state is, I think, in the process of testing all that and kind of seeing if that's been resolved and if there is actually more capacity for the ponds. And where I'm getting at is there are 7 houses, I think 7 on Canyon Road that are basically dumping their septic systems are on a terrace, right, above the beach. And water goes down. It's very lazy, right? So those people are potentially losing their houses if they aren't able to mitigate the septic. And so where the BCPUD could come in is by getting this test done and understanding the capacity of the sewer ponds. There are potential sewer hookups to help those people that are renting those houses, people that are living there. Those houses kind of have a lot of history and character. So I'm really interested in projects that, one, don't cause another problem by one being solved, right? Like helping people, hurting the environment, or vice versa. And I'm also really interested in looking at just ways that the BCPUD can solve both at the same time. Did I answer your question?
More or less.
Well, I think that as a BPUD director, the issue comes to the board primarily when people are trying to make improvements to their project, whether they're going to their property, whether they go to the county and get a permit, or somebody simply reports them to us to say this guy's building something on his property. As Andrew pointed out, it's not a case where we're going to go looking for violations, but we have to address the issue. But I think that I remember when I was on the board with you, Jack, and somebody would come to get a unlimited water use permit because all they were building was a garage or a studio. And there was a suspicion on the board that that wasn't going to end up being a garage or a studio. It was really going to be a second unit. And we were caught between a dilemma of sort of looking the other way because we had a feeling what the use of that structure was going to be versus, boy, if that structure was there, it would provide some housing for somebody who couldn't otherwise afford it. And so while we pay attention to the amount of water that's being used by a particular customer, and I would still defend a moratorium on not allowing people to just have unlimited water use, we are aware of the fact as directors, but also as members of the community, that people are slowly developing little second and third units on their property to provide housing for people who otherwise couldn't live here. And I think that as a director of the BPUD, I would not make any effort to dispossess those people of that housing, even though it may not be up to Hoyle, you know, that's how I feel about it.
I had a question that was emailed into me, so maybe it was a good, from Ralph Kanicha.
Okay.
And he was asking the question to be answered first by Andrew, but wanted to hear from everybody. And he said, given the increased demand for all types of housing, affordable, private, and expansion of existing homes, is the water moratorium still an ordinance that should be observed? Your thoughts, please.
Thank you, Ralph. Definitely, yes. No question, the moratorium has to be observed and protected. I think I knew that we were going to move toward affordable housing on this meeting because I have the BCLT experience, but I think the moratorium is our guiding light, and all of the projects that are being approved in town, or all the projects that require a water meter or a permit from the county, are submitted to the county or coastal commission, and they then review everything and they come to the BPUD for their approval. And so projects that are being approved are essentially being vetted and studied by the BPUD and approved or not. And the BPUD has very good judgment, and you know, this like leadership, these stewards that I've mentioned earlier have really been diligent and thoughtful and careful to uphold the rules of the moratorium or how they interpret that they should be. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of changes, but I don't think that a lot of changes in terms of housing being proposed, but I don't think that there are situations happening where water that doesn't exist is being summoned or created and being issued to new proposals.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a big supporter of the moratorium. I think there was a lot of foresight at the time to impose it because of the limited amount of water that's available to our town. And then several factors have played into that over the years. I think that the town is no longer entitled to draw any water from Gospel Flat. We can't touch Pine Gulch Creek or any of the aquifers down there. And the closest we've been able to come in finding a new water source is we dug a couple of wells looking for emergency water, which was very timely because we had this drought. And other than that, though, it's very difficult because we don't even know the size of the aquifer that we've tapped into or the quality of water that's in it or how long that water would last. But at least if we're really in a tight spot, at least we've started to find a few available sources of emergency water on a short-term basis. If we could combine that with everyone rationing, if we have to get to that point, I think we could get through the worst of a drought situation. But other than that, the moratorium works as a way to control the amount of water the town is using which is pretty limited. And it has the side effect, of course, of preventing being overdeveloped. And I remember when I moved to town, the big term was that we shouldn't be Carmelized like the town of Carmel, which just got out of control and became 20,000 people. And that probably would have happened to Bolinas if it wasn't for the moratorium. And so I'm a big supporter of the moratorium.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, I'm a big supporter of it, but one of the things that I really support are the findings of the water master that demonstrated that we had real reasons to have a water moratorium. And it was fought for 9 years, and it cost us a good chunk of money. We never lost, but came to a settlement, but still cost us lawyers' fees, and was took a lot of,
Several million.
yeah, it took a lot of energy out of people who were on the board and forced many of them to leave town just on that alone.
We were sued for $30 million.
Right.
Personally.
So that's, and what the moratorium represents to me are the limits of nature. And we can do all that we want to do as human beings and try to ignore that, which we have been doing to our detriment. Or we can say, no, the moratorium is a real thing, and here's how we're going to respond to it as if we were living in a real environment and not just one that we wish were here or looks like some other place where they have water like back east. So absolutely the moratorium, but it is an issue. It's I remember one board member whose name I will not mention said, well, does that mean that my kid can't live here in Bolinas? Maybe. Nobody had a quote unquote a right to live in Bolinas if they quote unquote couldn't afford it. On the one hand, and on the other hand, that doesn't seem right. So it seems like there are better things we could have done to help make that not so unequal as it is today, and as it is in the United States, as it is in all over the world, with people getting very, 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 very rich, and others really having nothing on the one hand. So maybe with our moratorium, using it as a real sort of mark for us to demonstrate our commitment to the environment and to living within the environment.
And I think I said this originally, that yes, I'm completely committed to it, and it seems just so rational to me. You have X amount of water. You can't use more than that. I just, to me, it's that simple. And how that plays out is always, of course, because people are not simple. It gets complicated, but the concept seems pretty straightforward to me. And I completely support it.
Can I just say one thing for Ralph?
Yeah.
I also think that if we were to find another source of water or sources of water, that doesn't necessarily mean that we suddenly start issuing water meters. I think it's kind of developed as an emergency or a backup or a supplemental system, but it's not like, hey, we found more water, we can build more houses. Unless the town decided that that's what they wanted to do, but I don't think that's really in the spirit of how that was developed.
Okay.
Hand up, Jonathan.
So, okay.
Hi, if I could ask a quick clarification, where were the test wells dug, and were there any flow data collected?
I'm not catching his question.
Oh, the wells, where were they dug, that you were referring to?
Groundwater wells that the district has been approved to add to our water systems. And that there's some flow data that has been collected and submitted to the state. I'm sorry, I'm just asking. I think he's
Thank you
asking.
for that clarification. Does it at any level compare with the amount of water withdrawn from Arroyo Hondo? Is it a order of magnitude less?
Yes, a considerably less comes out of the resource recovery well than what the town uses in any given day. But in a really tight situation, when there's a drought, it might just make the difference. Yeah, even if you get another 10 or 15,000 gallons a day, that could be the difference.
Thanks very much.
There's a couple of chat.
Okay.
Well, one says who supports the BCLT, which I think,
Just generally asking who,
yeah, that's on there.
okay, in the chat, I guess a question directed to each of the candidates is who supports the BCLT?
Yeah.
And, let's see, who did we start with before? Grace, do you mind going first?
Yeah, I'm a little baffled by how that question relates to the BPUD directorship, except for somewhat tangentially. Do I support affordable housing? Yes, I do.
And I'd just like to see the environment be part of what the BCLT does. It was originally a land trust. And it was something that the BPUD had some interest in. But I absolutely appreciate and speak to, for other communities, the formation of a community land trust, which is a really old and very wonderful idea. That started actually in the South. Some people have been working with projects in New Orleans, and they want to know how they can sort of make it into something more permanent than just kind of coming together every once in a while to have a community garden or whatever, and worry about losing the space to be able to do it. So I keep referring to the fact of the BCLTs, the BCLT and CLAM and all the things that are being done in West Marin. So I'm definitely in favor of it. I just have some questions about process and the inclusion of environmental and land issues.
I support what the land trust is doing. It started in a different direction, but it clearly became the only entity in town that seems to have the ability to create affordable housing for low and middle income people. I mean, and because that need has become so great, there is in fact a state law that got passed that requires every agency in the state, including the BPUD, to make efforts to provide affordable housing in their community in whatever way you can. And the BPUD doesn't provide housing directly, but it can be helpful in achieving that goal by working with the land trust or other groups. So to the extent that the land trust is trying to promote affordable housing, I'm definitely supportive of it.
I'm definitely supportive of it. I'm a board member currently.
You should maybe recuse yourself.
I would certainly recuse myself, or I would not be on both boards at once if I become elected to land trust or to the BPUD, and would be really careful about getting involved in conversations that involve a project that I've previously worked on with the land trust. So the BPUD has 4 field operators, and 2 of them live in land trust housing, just to give you a sense of like the importance of it. And then I just wanted to make a clarification. The community in community land trust means housing legally. And I obviously support the community, Bolinas Community Land Trust, but I also very much support a Bolinas Land Trust, which doesn't exist at the moment. If there was a group of people, which I think there is, that wanted to start buying and protecting parcels just for the sake of protecting them, then I also support that. I'm kind of bummed that so many lots have been cleared and fenced in and are just kind of sitting there waiting for an RV to pull in.
Right, speak to that really quickly, that, that's how the Bolinas Community Land Trust started. That was a place where people would donate lots, and they did have lots. I don't know whether you know that background. So
Yeah.
it did start at that, and the reason that those were let go was because of tax reasons. They couldn't support.
Yeah.
I didn't know what it was.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that approach the board and myself and say, can we protect this lot instead of developing it? And I believe that there's a legal responsibility for the land trust to develop housing because of the word community and the way our structure is set up.
Okay.
There's another question in the chat too.
Okay, let's get a chance for the.
All right. The next question was, is it a requirement to live full-time in Bolinas to be a board member? If so, are you all full-time residents?
Yes.
And we're working on it.
Yeah, I think you do have to be a resident of the district if you're, probably measurable by whether you're registered to vote here or not. And I've been.
I live here.
Okay.
There it is.
There's more, but I don't know if you want to. Okay. So then the next one is, Airbnb significantly decreased rental housing and primary housing. Short-term tourists are motivated to respect water usage. A hotel industry throughout town has contributed to housing scarcity and student numbers. What are the candidates' positions on how to address this issue? Dr. Jose.
How was that issue defined? What's the issue?
Yeah,
Short-term rentals.
Short-term rental, yes.
As it affects the use of water?
And available housing. And available housing.
Has contributed to housing scarcity.
Housing scarcity. Oh, okay.
That's not.
Do you want to go first?
Sure. We're very limited as a BPUD board to what we can say or govern what people do with their property. We do discover that sometimes Airbnb use or short-term rentals can result in people not being conscious of the water situation and using too much. But I think that there were several times when we had an opportunity to sort of weigh that and whether it was really true or not, and discovered it was not as big an issue as we thought it was. So I'm not sure that setting that aside and talking about the use of short-term rentals and Airbnbs as affecting the availability of housing, that's a really serious problem. And I have already brought up at one BPUD meeting a proposal that I saw raised in several cities, including Vancouver, in which they started to put a tax on houses that were either vacant for at least half the time or had a turnover of more than X number of tenants in a given period of time, trying to get people to stop doing that. But as a BPUD director, we really have no control over that.
Okay, maybe how are we?
Anybody else want to?
Andrew, and then
yeah,
you want to go next?
yeah. I mean, I completely agree with Jack. I follow this all over the country. The Vancouver thing, Crested Butte had a problem where they realized that 37% of their housing was being short-term rented. They put a moratorium on new licenses and they're looking at it for 12 months. So it's definitely a problem. I think that the water usage is definitely something that the BPUD can kind of gauge and control and reprimand. I think the Bolinas community plan was facing this issue with where are people gonna live or visit, and they didn't want hotels in town, which I think was a good move. And so the second unit was really kind of seen as the silver bullet to take that on. And so I think that the second unit is really valuable. I think that the new septic program that's starting to come up is a great way to get the county to allow these units to happen, and at the same time upgrade people's septic systems, because the existing systems are so outdated and bad for the environment that the upgrade, which is a discount, would be a win-win. People can find housing, and the earth that is draining into these creeks that go out to the ocean are just being protected.
Grace?
I wasn't sure what order we were going in. I'm not gonna reiterate that it's kind of out of our purview, but I was very interested, during the drought, we were looking at this really closely. We were looking at water use. Obviously, the BPUD has, procedures in place. If somebody is using more than their share of water, there's a whole series of things that happen automatically. What was very often a problem were people's automatic sprinkling systems that were not well tended, more than, the party house on the corner, which really surprised me. I had complete, knee-jerk reaction, like, oh, it's all these Airbnb people who don't care, and that very surprisingly seldom turned out to be true, and it was eye-opening for me. I'm not in favor of having the whole mesa covered with uninhabited houses. I think I've made that clear, but what seemed to be true on the ground was surprising to me and opened my eyes quite a bit. And I would never put in a drip system, let me just say. But yeah, we've been looking at it really carefully, particularly in the last couple of years.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I would agree with that information. I would say that just this idea of quote unquote improving your septic system and considering the use of a septic system as being a danger to the environment is questionable, and they have been trying for a number of years on Tamales Bay to really figure out, and they have people who have houses on the lagoon, on the bay, what the origins of the bacterial the bacterial counts that they find. So just to say that all of that needs to be looked at. It's another one of those issues where, I mean, to Grace's point, where you think the answer is X, but when you really go about and do the work that needs to be done, which is always annoying. What do you mean I have to take data? And what do you mean I have to have a plan for these data that I want to take? The story comes out differently. So I would offer that, yes, I would agree that there's very little we can do about people and how they use their property. I mean, unless it became something like Lake Tahoe, which I believe they did put in an ordinance to say that you cannot have these short-term rentals on the one hand, but Lake Tahoe has a governing body. So maybe that speaks to what's lacking here, because the BCPUD can't be all things to all men. But we need to have some real sort of overall looking at a lot of the systems that we use. And again, I'll just get it back to the way we use water in this town and see how we can help support people to do a better job without pricing them out.
Okay. We have another question from Jenny.
I would like to speak to the community plan, which was developed in 1975 and amended a couple of times since then. That's kind of our guiding document. It's been reviewed several times in groups and that sort of thing. And there are a lot of things that are brought up in it. Ag use, housing, et cetera, and the county still recognizes this as an important document as they look at projects and define us as a town and where we're going. And I just want to read one part. In the introduction, it says, limiting the impact of humans on the environment is one of the most important planning objectives in the Belize Community Plan. Protecting the environment, plant and animal life, and the landscape is more than a legal obligation as under the Environmental Protection Act. The Belize community has repeatedly shown that environmental issues are its first concern. And it goes on to list the lagoon, the ocean, and coastal scrub habitat as our main habitat, a much important habitat. So it also mentions the importance of forming a advisory group, a council, a village association, because as Rudy brought up, these are things that these are issues, all of these issues are very important. And, you know, you could say that this document is or is not outdated, that it does or does not need to be amended. But it does ask that we address these issues. And the BCPUD has so much on its plate. Just go to one meeting and I don't know how you do it. I really appreciate that you do it. I have to say that 200%. But I'm wondering if you would support some sort of auxiliary group to address, for instance, what Rudy has brought up, ongoing report to the BCPUD on issues that come up. For instance, now we have a lot going for $250,000, that's just a lot. You know, I mean, we have the economic issues to go. Would you support, how do you feel about the community plan, being, talked about, as related to current issues that are here, some sort of way to, discuss these and make suggestions and bring in public input?
Are you asking all the
I'm
candidates?
asking all the candidates.
Okay, and, why don't we start with Jeannie?
So I think it's a good idea. We brought it to the BPUD and the BPUD thinks it's a good idea to have some kind of convening mechanism where people can bring all these various issues that are not specific to BPUD and have the various organizations that are part of our communities come and listen to them and make connections and be more efficient at working together on some of the problems that we can't all solve, but may not be exactly in our purview or exactly in another agency's purview, but working together, we can get better solutions. But I was going to say, I would argue that the Bolinas plan, it reminds me of I was trying to look up the plan of the limits to growth that was put together in the 60s. And it talked about the finite resources that the planet has. And I would say to the Bolinas community plan, there's nothing in there that isn't, there's some little elements that should be tweaked perhaps, or there's some things that the county wouldn't accept then. So they were out there then, but now the county is more amenable because in fact, a lot of what we said in what was written, not we, because I didn't write it, but a lot of really good people did, a lot of community people who are still here, that it's not even prescient. We knew all of this was going to be happening. We knew what was going on with climate change many years ago. You could even argue that we knew about it in 1901 when you see articles about coal-fired, using coal for heating, etc. So it's not like we didn't know this was all going to happen. And what's nice about the community plan is it lays it out. And a lot of the things that are great about Bolinas are in the plan and we've done them. And a lot of things that are great about the plan we haven't done them and we could do them. But I like that idea and I think the BPUD supports it. I would too.
So when this issue was originally presented to the BPUD, I had a different vision of what you're talking about, which is to take the community plan and try to get it evolved to its current situation, reflecting what's going on in this town today and get a lot of input from the community. And of course, you're right, the BPUD as a board, we already have, our plate is pretty full. So it's not a job that we can undertake as a board. My suggestion at the time was that you could sort of form a village association in which you would have a representative from the schools and from the fire department and the community center and the museum and a half a dozen other entities that exist, the land trust and the rod and boat club, all the different interests that exist in this town, and have representatives of those entities come together and discuss one or more of the very issues that you're talking about, and whether something is in compliance with the community plan or not, and what can we do to improve it, or what can we do to create a new plan for a problem that didn't even exist, that they didn't contemplate. You know, I think that tourism was discussed briefly in the community plan, but they never anticipated what's going on right now. So that's a really important issue, but it's not one that we as a board can solve. But I'm in favor of a group of people representing all the different points of view coming together to discuss those and coming up with proposals. And a proposal that sounds good, even for amending the community plan or going to the county to get them to cooperate with us, I would be very much in favor of the BPUD then taking that proposal, assuming that we agreed with it, and carrying it forward on behalf of the BPUD.
Just a second, to give everybody else a chance to. Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Andrew and then Grace.
Yeah, I mean, ever since I've been coming to meetings in town, there's always been talk of the Village Association or a town hall forum, and I think it's great. There was a meeting this year, I think, at a BPUD meeting where everyone was kind of bringing that energy and trying to get some inertia. I think it would be really valuable to have that. There's Janine, I think the Bolinas community plan is something that the county does recognize, but like, for instance, if you look at the community plan and you show like the wetland drainage map, and if you have a biologist, or if you submit a permit, let's say for that project, and a biologist or several biologists say, well, there's actually no wetland species here, and the soils test out, and you know, we've done our inventory with the Marin GIS and the state GIS, then that consultant data usually kind of trumps the town plan. And so I think there's a lot of people in town that frustrates, and there are so many important things in the town plan, like Jeannie said, like it wasn't prescient, that maybe could use a little bit of revising and updating. But I like the idea of studying all these like little satellite groups that are in town that have so much passion, you know, like the Lagoon, the Bolinas Eucalyptus Project now, some of like maybe even the Land Stewardship Committee is involved, but to then report and get these groups together and make a little bit of momentum for, okay, how do we actually, we all agree on this, how do we get this done? Because we aren't an incorporated town, so we don't have like a vehicle to like tell the county we're going to change this.
Yeah. Piggybacking on what Jack proposed, I agree with that. I would support it. I'd like to speak to, you know, a group that's extremely unrepresented here. We have, you know, a whole lot of people who are Spanish speaking in our town. And I think that those are voices that are underrepresented in all of those groups that got, you know, that were named. And I think that for a while, Evie and, you know, some of the people during the Black Lives Matter movement that was happening during COVID, we had some town meetings, and there were voices that I was hearing over Zoom that came together to speak in a way that I'd never heard before. And I work at the school, and we've done a lot of outreach, and we're doing much more. But I think that this community really needs to take those voices, actively solicit those voices, and that's complicated, and I think it really needs to happen. So if that was a part of this, I mean, I would not want this to move forward unless that was part of it also.
Good point.
You're here. Does someone else have from the audience? I don't know if does anyone else from the audience? I'm just a little mindful of time. We're almost at 8:50. And we also have closing statements if we're trying to finish by 9. But you want to ask a question?
It should be a short question with short answers. What committee of the BCPUD would you choose to be on? I understand the BCPUD has committees that work and report to the board. There's the personnel committee, the operations committee, this committee, that committee.
That one.
Pardon?
That one. What you said, but this one and then that one.
Okay,
No.
if you would each, have you thought about that?
Jack, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, and generally, everybody is on 2 committees. Yeah.
Two, would you?
So, yeah, so I'm on the personnel committee with Grace, and we're also the legal committee that deals with the legal issues that come before us. So I would probably just stay with those because I've been doing it for a while.
Okay, yeah.
I'm not sure I'm aware of every committee. I'm currently working with the Grand Master Steve Matson, Jack, and Kirsten on an ad hoc committee for exploring the possibility of a new office, because like Jack said earlier, the building is just kind of in disrepair. So I'm kind of learning about the ways that the committees interact with the staff and how busy the staff are. So I think I would be interested in continuing that. I have the experience with the architecture and construction and building industry and a lot of interface with the county. So maybe something related to that. And then I'm really interested in operations and infrastructure and all that. I'm not sure if there's a committee for that, but I also have with the land trust, I've been starting to like kind of slide into some of the financial committee stuff, which I'm not qualified for, but I'm interested in kind of expanding that knowledge base and getting a sense of what we're working with so that we can maybe get more grants or bonds to develop infrastructure update stuff.
Okay.
Grace, you feel like you're covered?
I love being on legal and personnel. I would choose to stay on those, but I have other interests as well. They need be to branch out.
Yes, and for me, operations is number one and budget is number two. So Andrew, you still work on it. And I did that before and it's what drove me. I mean, what drove me crazy? No, not at all. No, it's really the most interesting. I think operations is the most interesting thing and the most critical thing. But that's my prejudice. That's not saying that everybody else isn't doing really interesting and important work. But for me, that's what it would be.
Wrap it up.
Okay, or there's anything in the chat?
No.
Then,
No more questions, Gladys?
pardon?
Is that it to question?
Yeah, I was otherwise gonna just go to the next segment, which is other candidates ask questions, but could we put 2 hours? I just don't know how much, how do people want to use the time? We have about 20 minutes. So, yeah, do you have a question?
I just had a quick comment in response to the people who asked about short-term rentals. The county is now finally working on that. They're going to write an ordinance to regulate short-term rentals. Sarah Jones was just hired from San Francisco as the assistant director of CDA, and she's very bright and got great ideas, lots of energy, and I'm confident about what I was thinking there.
And I think there's currently a moratorium on more short-term rentals in Western Maine.
Yeah, but it's really, thanks for mentioning it. They did just put a, in the interim, give them time to write this ordinance, and realizing it was getting completely out of hand, they will not approve any new short-term rental situations.
All right.
So why don't we go into the, if it's okay with everybody, to go to the segment where the candidates can, if you guys have, what we had agreed on, the candidates have an opportunity to ask one question of each of the other candidates.
There's a subject which hasn't, come up yet, which I think is important. And that's the Rid Mesa Road. The culverts are in disrepair, they're filling up the flood. There's a budget item entitled Mesa Drainage. I don't know what we're getting.
Right.
How many of you are going to take an interest in what's going on Mesa and correcting this regime of anarchy which prevails?
It's my number one issue.
Each one.
Okay, Andrew, do you want to?
Sure. Yeah, and forgive me if my understanding is limited, but I have looked at the Todd drainage plan before and talked through it. And I understand that the BCPUD has kind of oversight of the roads, but they don't own them. I'm not sure if that's true. But
There's been confusion. I can clear that up.
Don't take too long on that one.
Sorry, Jen.
Originally, it
Sorry.
was assumed that the BCPUD owned roads, but when we tried to find the instrument of conveyance in the deed records, it wasn't.
Right.
So the prevailing opinion right now is that the heirs of Smadback scattered all over the world own in, on the fee in the road, and the public, each member of the public and the BCPUD have an easement over the road there. Lately, the BCPUD has not been very active in regulating what goes on the road, probably because it's no longer believed the BCPUD owns them. But a slight tweak in the whereases would give the BCPUD valid jurisdiction over the road because of the BCPUD's jurisdiction over all the utilities. So that would give enough of an interest in the easement for the BCPUD to undertake regulating what goes on the road. And in addition, we could form a road district if we wanted to. And tax us. But how many of you are going to take an interest in what the hell goes on the mesa with regard to the roads and drainage?
Well, I'll just answer quickly. I think the infrastructure, the BCPUD infrastructure is really important to maintain, and that's something that is priority. I think the drainage is and the roads are pretty important. I think the swale and the creeks that drain the mesa in themselves should be maybe have a little oversight of those. But I like the idea, maybe it's just an exploration of every little neighborhood or block has like a little email thread or text thread that talks about, hey, we need to like fill in our potholes or not fill in our potholes. So it's kind of this like little micro community group, and maybe there's a way that we can have volunteer system or small little kind of informal unofficial districts where we just have like, you know, a ditch clearing day or a pothole filling day, and maybe that is with a little guidance from the drainage plan.
I'd like to just join Jack on this issue because a lot of talk is currently going on in the community about fire and escape. And our mesa, they talk a lot about Mesa Road, which is paved, being a real problem, but the real problem, as I see it, is up on the mesa with the dirt roads. And I really want you guys to put that in your bonnet as a fire protection escape issue for people in the community. It's got to be improved, and it's got to be a way that it could be in your jurisdiction somehow, even if you are the people that go and try and get the neighborhood involved. But the problem with that is that a lot of those homeowners are not living there and not going to do the work. So,
but in fairness, I need to give Grace and then Jeannie and Jack each a chance to answer the question.
I feel really strongly about the fire issue. I find it,
yeah, but
terrifying.
up there more than down
I
here.
live on the
That's
mesa.
some that.
Yeah, no, well, I live on the mesa and I like having more than one escape route, and I live on a dead end road. So I find that really
At least
nerve wracking.
that
I
would be
take it,
prepared.
absolutely, I take it really seriously, and I know that, you know, in the last couple of years, we've worked with George at the firehouse. The fire department seems to have more sway with people when the BCPUD says, we'd really like you to like clear out your brush that you have planted in the middle of the road. They give a lot of pushback a lot of times, and I'm not saying specific people, but in general, there is a lot of pushback from the community to maintain those, when the issue of clearing and maintaining those right of ways comes up. It seems to be more effective when it's the BCPUD with the fire department, because they seem to listen to the fire department more. Reasonably so. I'm not arguing. I'm just saying whatever's the most effective way, I'm absolutely in favor of continuing that. And in terms of the drainage, that project was being worked on very steadily when Louis Lycover was alive. And there was a combination of things that happened as I see it. There was Louis's untimely demise, bless his heart, COVID, and we had a series of, for a completely diverse variety of reasons, we were very low staffed for a long time. And our staff was putting their primary focus in keeping the major infrastructure running, the water and the sewer. That situation has turned the corner, I am glad to say. And I very much agree with you that the drainage projects need to be continued, and I support that 100%. But I just wanted to give a little context for why it seems like it's been kind of static for a couple of years now.
Yeah, that's really good, Grace, because I was wondering about that, and I mean, Louis was such a wonderful person that we don't have to even talk about how much we miss him.
Yeah.
But I would talk to him about the drainage issue, because it was on my watch again that we did hire Todd engineers to develop what was like a sort of 30,000 foot flyover of what's available in the literature, if you call it that, to show the topography of the mesa and where the drainage should go. And then ground truthing is what was needed, which I think happened to certain degrees, but it's obvious that we need drainage is number one in terms of helping us deal with our water problems and helping us deal with our road problems. So that's the first thing that I think should be brought back to life. And I'd also like to say that, yes, we have a wonderful staff and everybody agrees that people are doing the best they can. Maybe we need more staff. Maybe Jennifer and the staff need more help. So maybe we should be looking at that and how do we do that? So that we're not just saying, oh, well, yeah, well, we could if we would, because our problems now are getting to the crisis point. And this might be one way to what part of the solution toward getting some real purchase on some of these problems.
So the BPUD, for as long as I've been on the board, and when you were on too, Jack, has always exercised what I call dominion and control over the roads. Even though we don't own the roads, we pretty much get to control how they're used and what can be done on them. So we have a roads committee. That's one of our regular committees. And we've developed a few ordinances. Don was part of several of them, in which we found that a lot of people started to create obstacles in the road so the cars would go slower. And in some instances, maybe nobody will use my road if I plant a tree in the middle or something. And so we had to create some rules about obstructing the roads and about how big and wide your speed bump or speed hump can be in front of your house and how many you can have. We also tried to develop a drainage plan so that everybody was sending their water in the same direction. And then there's the problem of us being the franchising agency for Recology. That's the garbage collection company. And they are entitled to have a decent road to drive their trucks on in order to pick up the garbage. And sometimes if it's going to beat up their trucks too much, they'll say, listen, we're not going to drive down that road unless somebody fixes it. What I have discovered over the years is that most of the little communities on the Mesa are pretty protective of their own little fiefdom, and they would rather just pass the hat among a dozen or two homes and fix the roads that give them access to their property and let everybody do that, because some people like to fix them up really good, and then some people are not so excited about that because they feel the traffic goes too fast, creates a lot of dust. And so it's a combination of the BPUD keeping control over those things that it needs to keep control of without usurping the, let's say, decision-making of each little neighborhood. And we have in the past talked about, well, what if we just formed a road district and everybody was required to kick in money and the whole gridded mesa that didn't have paved roads would then be maintained by the district. And I've never found that that was a really popular idea. We could try it again, but most of the people are resistant to it. So that's been my experience on that one.
Okay, great, thank you. Are we ready to have the candidates ask each other questions? Let's see. So the rules are that each candidate can ask one question of each of the other candidates, and can we start with, Grace?
I will waive my right to ask questions. I feel like I have gotten the information that I want.
Okay, Jeannie?
So I just had one question and it relates to sea level rise, and I wondered what the BPUD, how the BPUD can, so what role will the BPUD be able to play to help the community? I'm gonna say adapt, for want of a better word, to sea level rise. That would be my question.
Who are you asking that to?
Everybody.
Wanna go first?
I don't think we can do much. I mean, all we can really do is have a hand in commenting on projects that are being built or developed or planned that are really close to the ocean, to sea level. And to say, don't bother building right there or improving that property because it's going to be underwater. But we're really not a planning agency, so I don't see us being able to do much more than comment on anything that people want to do.
Andrew, do you want?
Yeah, I generally agree with that. I think there's a big responsibility to maintain and kind of project how our infrastructure is being affected by sea level rise. And if that means that we say, hey, you know what, the water is, maybe we monitor the height of water as it relates to our infrastructure, and it may at some point start changing the quality of our water because of salinity or something. But I think in terms of our infrastructure, that's important, but otherwise, I don't really know what we can do. I do think that it's important to start talking about it, and maybe it happens in these town meetings.
One of the places where I think that we do have a role, and I would like to say it's the BPUD Board of Directors, but it's actually been Jennifer. There have been many conversations with the coastal village associations, interacting with the coastal commission and the county plan, and often the small coastal villages' voices are very much not being listened to in the coastal commission planning process. And there's been, I think, great effort put out by our staff as well as people all the way up the coast to try to have a conversation rather than having somewhat draconian things come down from above that may or may not be appropriate to small places like ours. And so I think that that's where BPUD has been playing a role. And I think it's been important, particularly important just to draw the communities together so that there's conversation going on amongst these other small coastal places all the way up. So in that way, I would say, yeah, that's sounds good.
How about you, Jack? Do you have questions?
No, I don't.
Andrew? You have any?
Yeah, I have a question or two. So this question is for Jeannie. Jeannie, I really do respect your expertise and knowledge for the environment, and if I had a project in town that I was looking for an expert, I probably would reach out to you. My experience has been different though, or maybe it's just a limited one, but you have used your environmentalism as a tool to stop things that are important for our community. And I've talked about community a lot tonight. So community really matters to me, and I think that the solutions that we as a town develop must be as good for the people of our town as for the environment. And we have 200 people on a housing wait list. We have 75% low income. We have people living in substandard conditions. And I guess I'm wondering, how do you see yourself helping people in the community with your kind of agenda for the environment? Not just as it relates to protecting water quality or for projecting for sea level rise, but actually, like, how can the BPUD help people in our town.
Well, in the first place, I think this was the question that was asked of me in the beginning, so I don't want to repeat myself. My point is not environment over people, though without the environment, there can't be any people. And that people have come to, we call this now the anthropogenic age. So we know that our effects on the environment are way overwhelm what the environment. I believe Mother Nature will win out. So in that sense, that large sense, I'm not worried. But we never, what we asked for in my activities are better transparency. We pointed out some problems with some of the projects that were proposed to house people that in essence were taken up then. And because the projects were overbuilt, the proposals were overbuilt or had some really high costs or were not thought through well enough. Those are the things that we want to do, is to help make better projects. So it's a funny thing. I worked for the Environmental Protection Agency, as I said, for a long time. And what people said of me was, I know that you're passionate about the environment. And that was like a little dingling that said, oh, and really it's the agency that we're interested in, not the environment. And I can't tell you how many things that we should have been doing as an agency, as a national agency and regional agencies that we didn't do because we didn't really respect what our environmental laws were all about. So where we said in 1972, we would clean all the waters of the US in 5 years, we now have a Jackson, Mississippi, and it's not, I think we've already heard about the lead in everybody's pipes and these new persistent chemicals, well, Teflon. So I'm not proposing to quote unquote save the environment and kill all the people or bash them, push them out of town. What I am proposing is that we bring the environment to the table, and that we work together and develop projects that speak more for the community and speak of the issues that the community raises about them. Nowhere, I may have used some really strong language for me about the wealthy taking over, but it is what I see. The town is now full of billionaires. Okay, I get it. Maybe the people that I'll stop there, but to just say that characterizing me or the group that tried to bring a little more discussion to various projects should not be considered a group that is anti-affordable housing, which I think is what you're questioning me again and again. Leads me to believe you're implying. So it's not anti-affordable housing. It's a process that very much takes projects and presents them to the community and then says, like it or lump it, we're building this. And they haven't been able to do that except in some really wonderful, exceptions, which is like the house at 430 Aspen. That went up in a flash. That was a renovation and it housed people very quickly, and it's wonderful. So those are not things that the people that I talk to oppose. So please, if you can sort of lower the rhetoric on, I know you're passionate about the environment. You're goddamn right I am, and you should be too.
But
No buts. That's it.
But
I've said my piece.
what I like to say is that you did oppose the 430 Aspen project with a lawyer. And I believe that everyone in Bolinas cares about the environment a lot, and a lot more than most places. But there's a big piece of our town who I'm hoping that I can help represent and bridge between, that is having a hard time finding housing and feels like they are being they're missing opportunities to live here and work here because they're not valued more than, say, like an environmental issue. And I don't think anyone's saying that the environment isn't important, but what I'm wondering is, what is your mission
Okay,
in terms
so
of
wait,
the,
I'm gonna interrupt because it was just the format that we kept to was that we could ask one question of each of the candidates.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
well, no, I want to
Not a debate.
reiterate my question, like, how does your agenda for becoming a BCPUD board member, how will that help people of Bolinas? Not the environment, but people of Bolinas.
My
That was my
agenda
question.
is, my agenda has to do with helping people learn to live within their means in a very positive way, so that we don't face extinction because we've run out of water and we have no alternative. So they're all things that the BCPUD can do, and they relate only to that, and as opposed to the projects, as we've pointed out, as they come to the BCPUD, and the BCPUD has overview, has comments to make, whatever, they will be made. And I would imagine I would probably agree with them in general, because I'm not against the building of the development, let's call it. It might be building or it might not be, it might be renovating, which we'd really like to see more of. So I'm not against that at all. And that will come out, I think, if I am elected.
Okay.
So thanks, but
Yeah,
thanks
thank
very
you.
much for
Thank
the
you for answering.
questions. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Okay, and so now I think we're ready for the closing statements. Did anyone want, I don't want to be shutting anybody down.
No, that's fine.
Okay, all right. And I'm trying to remember how did we go this way for opening
Yeah.
statements? Maybe we'll go the other way for
Yeah,
closing statements,
Okay.
if you don't mind.
Yeah, I don't mind. It's actually a good segue. I never thought that I would live in Bolinas when I first came here. I thought maybe 30, 40 years from now that I would make it. So I'm here and I feel very lucky, and I feel a sense of duty to help contribute and kind of prolong it. I know I have ideas and I'm questioning things, but I am a realist. And I do feel like I have a lot of experience with the BCPUD in terms of attending meetings and interacting with staff. So I know that there is just a lot of value continuing to support staff day to day, continuing to try to support the staff in general in the future, improving and maintaining our water and our infrastructure. I definitely don't have all the answers, but I also don't have an ego, so that I'm willing to like listen to experts and stay in my lane. You've probably noticed that I think community matters. I do think that solutions must be as good as for the people as the environment. And I feel like the people, many people here are feeling left behind. And I hope the work that the BCPUD does continues to hear people out at meetings while protecting our delicate source of water and maintaining what we have. I'm eager to see more of my generation step up to carry the baton and become new stewards of the BCPUD. I have slight worries that there is this amazing existing board wealth of knowledge and experience and leadership, and they have done a lot, and they will be retiring or doing the next chapter of their life, and there will be an abrupt handoff versus maybe more of a transition. And I want to be someone from my generation to step up and learn and kind of hopefully humbly just absorb all that knowledge that these guys have. I hope you see potential in me to be one of those stewards. I see a lot of potential for our town to discuss new ideas and solutions to solving tricky issues. I think this means forward thinking, to look ahead at dealing with new realities and perhaps finding new ways to solve old problems. There was a professor I had who used to always quote someone, I don't know who it was, but he said, if you always do what you always did, you always get what you always got. I'm interested in exploring more ideas and technologies that help the BCPUD staff do their jobs more effectively and efficiently versus them putting out fires. If you have ever worked with Jennifer or the staff, they have an incredible capacity for taking stuff on that they probably should say no to. They work very hard, especially Jennifer. She is always available seemingly. And I want to support them and look for more ways to help them out because they are doing so much for our town. And I just want to thank all of you for coming and having questions and giving us your attention.
I have a favorite quote also, which I heard from Muhammad Ali, but it probably came from somebody else. But it's community service is the rent that you pay for your time here on earth. And I'm a big believer in that. I really think that we all have an obligation. It takes a village, and here we are, and it's a great village. I really enjoy this town, been here a long time, and all of you do too. That's why you're here. So I enjoy the service that I put on the BCPUD all these years. I did say this would be my last term if I'm elected again, because I agree also with Andrew that it does become a time to pass the baton to the next generation. And I see it happening in all the different boards of our town, and it's really good to see. I mean, those of us who've been here for a really long time, we've been doing a lot of work, and it's time to let the next generation pick up the baton and keep going. So the BCPUD is a challenge that I enjoy. And as I say, I seem to have a facility for chairing the meeting. So I'm glad to continue doing that if I'm elected again. Thank you very much.
So sort of speaking to the old folks with memories. So I was going to say at some point, you know, I'm as old as Joe Biden, but just like Joe Biden, I think that there are some things that can be done, some issues that need to be addressed that I won't say only old folks can do it, but I too, this would probably be one term for me, but I would like to do it and then pass the baton on to Andrew, giving him the benefit of all of my knowledge in all these years. And too bad we're competing against one another for this position, but maybe he can wait for 4 years and have me take on. So what I just wanted to write, I made a list of the things that I would take on as my, I'm calling it my portfolio if I were elected to the board. And the first thing would be drainage, to look at the drainage plan, to advise, to assess it and revise it as necessary and implement it, most importantly. The second thing would be the helping with the installation of rainwater catchment systems. I think that would be a very good way to help people get more water and use it appropriately. I would support the installation of gray water systems for laundry and showers, which I think is probably pretty common, but is it? And how about the people who haven't been able to figure it out? They could use some help. Discourage, we've already talked about this, I think, the use of automatic drip irrigation and automatic garden sprinkler systems. And I think that's pretty much a policy of the board, but just to sort of underscore it, support a low flush toilet installation program. I know we all think we're so cool, we all have low flush toilets, do we? In San Francisco, they were giving them out 20 years ago. So maybe we all do have it, but let's see, and let's see if we can help on that way. Encourage the installation of, as I mentioned, an electric composting toilet system for people on the Mesa for not outrageous amounts of money, and to be used in particular if we ever get another winter, rainy season. Encourage replacing lawns. Here's my thing, Andrew, with native plants and shrubs. Man, do I hear this everywhere, not in Bolinas. No. We're so environmentally, sensitive that we have one of the worst infestations, I'll call it, of invasive plants that I've seen anywhere. It's really shocking. But to help people understand what that means and how you would be helping the environment, doing something that's very personal and very rewarding. Support the removal of invasive species as developed on undeveloped and undeveloped properties. And then finally, work with relevant agencies to develop a map of the ecological zones, including legal use limitations, for example, watershed, streams, wetland areas, and native coastal habitat, so that we know where are the places that we should really be leaving them alone, despite their $250,000 lot price. If we had that map, we could inform people when they are on the cusp of shelling out their bucks, to do something different or think about it in another way. And one more thing, the last thing, is to develop materials on all of these topics to distribute to property owners, property renters, and to real estate people who are selling kind of perhaps not such truthful stories about what you can do when you buy a lot on the Mesa. Right, no, it's all good, it's all luck. No, it's all, so I mean, trying to start with really basic things that we can do, and then working our way out to the bigger picture.
Grace?
That is such a good list. That's a big list.
I'll bring Io back.
I'm sitting here, up here, which is always a strange place to sit, and looking out, and I know pretty much everybody in the room, almost. And I think that quality of relationship is what has always drawn me to small places and small communities, and why I've stayed here for so long. And yes, there's many projects that I'm interested on the BCPUD, but what I would speak to now is I'm really interested in continuing to grow these relationships that I have with almost all of you in different ways. I've known people because their kids were in school with mine. I've known people because I've worked on the board with them. I've, had Soup Saturday with them, all different ways. Jenny and I've known each other for forever, it seems like. And I think that what makes something as peculiar as the BCPUD board, which really is the sounding board for the community in many ways, in addition to the community center meetings, what makes it work is that there are these relationships, that people feel comfortable coming to meetings, they feel comfortable coming to the members of the board and, running into me downtown or whatever, and just chatting. And that there's some level of trust that we may agree, we may disagree, but that the conversation can happen. And that, I think, is one of the most, well, is it more valuable than providing fresh water? No, it's not. But it is another very, very intangibly valuable thing that happens in this community with the BCPUD. And I'm really committed to moving that or carrying that forward. And, I spoke earlier about trying to engage, the people that aren't sitting here. And I'm hoping that through what's going on at the school, some of the things that are going on at the school, that we can grow that out. And I'm real interested in working in that way also, because I think those voices need to be heard in this forum. And I have some ideas about how that might happen. So that's what I would have to say about this.
Okay, we're just under 3 minutes, so it's it all evens out. You self-ration during that time. But unless there's anything else that the candidates want, thanks to everybody for attending, and I don't like it being, you chair a meeting, Jack. I hope I didn't cut anyone off or offend anyone, or that everyone got to speak, wanted to speak, but trying to keep us on time. And so thanks to everybody who was attending via Zoom. And I think we're concluding Candidates Night 2022.
Yes.
Thank you, Jennifer.
And Grace, a day early on this birthday for you. Don't have to sing it in the business.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I like your best. Great.
Yeah.
I'll let you promote that. Yeah.